Today I will be speaking about globalization and the effects that it has on developing countries. I will be speaking about how multinationals affect developing countries, how in some situations these countries are just not prepared to enter global trade, and how the poor people have been, the vulnerable population have been affected by globalization financially and culturally. So when we think about globalization, we think about trade and products being able to go from one country to another with less and less restrictions. Many countries have benefited from globalization. Overall, we would say that globalization has been a success, but it is also important to remember that there are losers that come from globalization. It does not mean that we should get rid of globalization. It just means that we need to be better informed and that there are things that we can do to make it better. So how has globalization affected developing countries? So we'll start with multinationals. In Ecuador, Chevron, an oil multinational, went into extract oil, right? When they were in Ecuador, according to research done by Martin Core from a research center, they disposed 345 million gallons of crude oil into the Amazon forest. And they also threw 18.5 billion gallons of toxic waste in the Amazon forest. Now you think about it and you say, okay, that's terrible. The Amazon forest is pretty much the lung of this planet. And there are people living in that forest. There are indigenous communities living there. And according to the research done, many people either got sick or even died from the toxic waste and the crude oil that was in their soil and in their water. So these people decided, okay, we're going to take him to court. So they took him to court in New York. And now think about how much money has a multinational like Chevron and how much money has indigenous people from Ecuador. It's not a really balanced situation. So who won the trial? Chevron did. Now you may think, okay, well, maybe that's one situation, right? But if we put this in a general concept, think about all those little countries that just do not have the capital that many of these multinationals have. Some multinationals have bigger output than some countries, right? So how can we better this situation, right? Well, we have to set better rule of law, and it starts in those countries. If, for example, Ecuador would have had better environmental laws that could have stopped Chevron from doing what they were doing right in that moment, and maybe canceling their contracts because of the toxic waste and the crude oil that they were letting free in the Amazon forest, the problem wouldn't have escalated as much, right? And it wouldn't have caused as many maybe sickness and even deaths. So that's one. Multinationals and how countries need to be better prepared to control the power that they bring in. So another situation is how globalization affects the most vulnerable populations. So, for example, in North America, the North American Free Trade Agreement was thought out in a way that it would help many Mexican people come out of poverty. But in the 20 years since it has been implemented, actually more people have gone from being not poor to being more poor. And this is not the fault of Canada or the United States, right? Problem is that Mexico did not have strong enough institutions to control the influx of money that was going to come in and compete with these other companies that Mexico has. So especially farmers were affected, corn farmers were affected. And Mexico still tried to give subsidies to these farmers so that they would be able to compete better in the market. But again, it is hard to compete when you're small and developing. Another situation that came from that, for example, in a country like Colombia, um, there's not a strong rule of law. There's many rebel groups because of the geography of the country. It's hard for the government to control every area of the country. And what would happen is that these companies would come in and they would pressure people, and they would actually pay rebel groups to pressure people and even kill them. The International Trade Union Confederation in 2012 uh, had a research done that showed that 80 people were killed in that year, and 359 received death threats in that year. These are all people that were working in unions, trying to make their workplace better, trying to earn a fair wage for them and their families. So we've gone through multinationals and through protecting the poor in developing countries. And also another situation that comes from this is measuring growth. Growth is usually measured and usually showed in the news with the gross domestic product. Gross domestic product is how much goods and services a country produces in a given year. For example, Mexico has a GDP of over $1 trillion. And you would think, okay, they're doing great. You know, that's $1 trillion for 145 million people. But even then, it does not tell the whole picture. So a better way of measuring growth would be the Human Development Index. And it is already being used, right? But it's not being shown in the news and in the media. The Human Development Index has an education component, a health component, and an economic component. So it gives a better picture of what's going on in a country. So what to do about globalization, about all these bad situations? Should we roll it back? No. Globalization has given many people better standard of living, but it needs to be even better. It needs to have fair truths of fair rules of trade, sorry, and better control for the vulnerable populations of a country. And it has to be measured in a way that really shows what's going on inside a country. Thank you.